What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Sunbelt Syndicate, kind of our unofficial start to season 4 overall and season 3 with anybody but just me, right,
I
TJ?
feel like the last season just ended.
I know, it did.
That was
We
that was not that was not a very long break, but I don't
No,
think any of us expected to block out June for Coastal. So here we are. We're doing it again.
yeah, that's a good point. And it's fun to do that, but it is unaccounted for. So it did go a lot longer this year than we are typically accustomed to. I am one of two hosts here, Dominic Crissetto and TJ O'Sullivan, who's been our constant contributor, our worker behind the scenes, the man behind sunbeltsyndicate.com. If you haven't checked it out, be sure to do so. We are trying to ramp up as we get ready for football season. We really got that thing started thanks to TJ during baseball season, of all things. We did not see that coming. You really worked hard behind the scenes, so I want to give a shout out while we got everybody on and watching to TJ specifically for doing all of the hard work, the grunt work behind the scenes, literally learning how to make a website, right, man?
Yeah, exactly. And don't pay attention to the fact that it's not a whole lot of new content since realignment. Just know that we're working on stuff right now. We're getting some writers in place, and hopefully by the start of football, or I should say, a couple weeks prior to the season, we're going to have a whole bunch of preseason content rolling out, and then we're going to pick things right up at the start of the season. And football is going to be like the true launch. So just stay tuned on that.
Absolutely. Very true launch time for that, which was always the goal. We just kind of ramped up a little faster than we were willing to do at the beginning because, again, TJ got that rolling a lot faster than we expected. And we are happy
Didn't seem fast. I was starting to lose my vision while figuring out how to change the banner to a different color. So, I'm I am not a tech guy, but we got it done, and we're happy with what we got.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of football and getting rolling, the reason we are here in front of you today, or if you are listening to us audio wise, is because of Sunbelt Media Days happening down in New Orleans today, Tuesday, and Wednesday. That we will be down there with the West Division going today. As we know, the two best divisions in all of college football, right, TJ?
Yes, absolutely. And for sure in that region of the country as well.
Yeah, yeah. But literally the only two divisions left, sadly. And we know, TJ, let's just jump into this with what Commissioner Keith Gill let us know about realignment affecting the transition with La Tech, but he's kind of alluded to the fact that they will have to go away from divisions if they cannot include La Tech next season. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, and that was, rolling right into the absolute biggest, I think, bombshell of the day. Is just the fact that if La Tech is not able to join come 2026, they will do away with divisions for at least one. But he did say that Commissioner Gill did say that he likes the divisions and he thinks that there's more to play for, rather than, saying, I think that there's two schools of thought on this. I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer when it comes to divisions versus non-divisions. But I do like his reasoning behind, there's more to play for. You're splitting it up between 7 teams rather than the whole 14. You could potentially have a matchup at the end of the season. It hasn't happened yet, but you could potentially have a matchup at the end of the season between who would be the 2 top teams, and it just wouldn't matter based on how the records go. This is a completely hypothetical situation, but if you got the 2 top records and they're like tied and nobody's going to catch them, you're going to watch the same 2 teams go at it twice in a row in 2 straight weeks. So I don't know. I don't dislike divisions. I don't dislike the lack of divisions. But I think that it does give teams something else to play for. It's you win the division to get a berth to go play for the title, and it gives teams more opportunities, I would say. So I like it in that case. So the fact that he's willing to get rid of divisions, which based on scheduling, that's just really the only option. That's the big bombshell of the day. So now I think it becomes prudent for the Sun Belt to really work on if they really want to keep those divisions and not go to just a 13 school, just one, ACC, SEC style, they're going to have to work behind the scenes to get La Tech in, and they're going to have to do whatever needs to get done for them to get on board for 2026. Because regardless, Texas State's gone.
And I do agree with you. I think there will be a lot of maneuvering in the background, both by La Tech by themselves and obviously the Sun Belt helping them in whatever aspects they can do. Probably even some monetary aspects if needed, but probably just not a lot of that because we know the Sun Belt can ill afford to start paying other exit fees. Although they did get $5 million for Texas State leaving, so they could use some of that to further sway an earlier exit for La Tech, possibly. The one thing that I've said about the divisions is I'm like you. I don't love them. I don't hate them for any reason. I do like the fact that you know who you're pretty much going to play every year in your division, and then you've got some crossover games. The one thing that I'll say is if they do have to go away from it, I do want to keep the scheduling in unofficial divisions, if you will, so we still see a lot of that same aspect. So we can still get rewarded in that regard without really totally taking them away, just in name only kind of thing. Because I do like how it's really worked out so far really well. The East and the West usually have one representative who's obviously the best with a record, and the same thing in the East, and then they go head-to-head in the championship game. My fear, and the reason I'd be okay with doing away with divisions, is some year that's just not going to work out. You're going to have one team at the top of the East or the West that lost only one game to the team below them, and the team above is the one that's undefeated, and then everybody in the other side of the bracket is got 2 or 3 losses apiece or more. And so far, again, we haven't run into that, but that's the fear. If you've got a team to push for a college football playoff now, you better hope your team wins. But if they beat a 3-loss team, as we've seen in the Big Ten, right, when Ohio State goes up against Purdue in a Big Ten championship game, they're not getting any points for winning that game, even if they win by 30 plus. So I don't think as a G5 representative trying to push to get that college football playoff spot, you can ill afford to not have a matchup that's going to propel you forward instead of one where they say, yeah, you're supposed to beat that team. You're supposed to beat the crap out of them,
Yeah, and I think that brings up a great point, because in that hypothetical situation that I brought up before, where you could potentially have like an Army-Navy situation that was brewing all last year, where you play them, in the final game of the year in the regular season, and then you play them again in the conference championship, you do have to bring up the fact that the CFP committee is going to be looking for quality opponents. And I would say that matchup happening twice between what would in this scenario be the top 2 teams in the Sun Belt, as opposed to going across division to face a 2-loss, 3-loss, even 4-loss team, that is something to consider. And that would probably be better for the Sun Belt to do away with divisions. But that really wasn't the focus of this one. It was just the fact that if La Tech can't, they will do away with divisions for the interim until they're able to get them into the conference.
Yeah, I would even be okay with unofficially having like some, 1AA team kind of fill that 14th spot for a season, right? Again, unofficial, no invite. I'm not talking about that, but just somebody that everybody kind of gets to play. That way you can really have the spectrum of like, okay, they all got to play this team, a kind of measurement type of thing. They all got to play a weaker opponent, if you will. So it's all kind of fair across the board as far as that is concerned. And then the teams that are really and truly within the Sun Belt, get to do their own thing and say the measurement across the board is fairly accurate.
Pull an ACC and just do away with the footprint. Go get like Montana State or North Dakota State.
Yeah,
I would go get one of them.
I honestly
Powerhouse FCS.
Yeah, I think a team like that would love something like that. Like, hey, for a year, we need you to be an unofficial member and just play a bunch of our teams to help fill our schedule out. And, you get to play a bunch of teams you don't typically get to play. Like, I think someone would, again, this is kind of the same thing, right? We've talked about this a little bit in the past, like Marshall and Southern Miss not playing this year is a missed opportunity. Of course, it wasn't supposed to happen, and that's why it didn't. But this is where like the wrestling fan in me comes in. You have to adjust storylines in order to keep the momentum and the interest there and the intrigue. Like, do that. You aren't the ACC. You aren't the SEC. You aren't the Big Ten. So do stuff to draw people in. That's something that could do that, right? It is not something you typically see or hear about, but you don't think a ton of people would start tuning in to see North Dakota State's chance every week to knock off Division 1A opponents, FBS opponents. So I think it would be really interesting. It wouldn't be easy either, right? Like, honestly, some of our teams, unfortunately, probably wouldn't even be thought of to be like better than North Dakota State in some realms. So I think most of them would, but there's going to be some that towards the bottom that may not be favored going into that matchup. So It would be interesting. As always, Ben James jumping in saying, "What's up, everybody?" and go Red Wolves, which is fitting since we are talking about the West this evening. And then, I just talk on the La Tech thing. I think he made sense of it as best he could. It's a rivalry aspect. It's going to bring heat. I think the I don't even really know how to say what I'm trying to say here. All the background noise about not wanting them in, I understand from a perspective of, bringing in the big dollars, right? Like, it's not a Memphis who's going to command more TV dollars. That was my argument, actually, specifically. But there was people that echoed that. But now that they're official, I know that they're not actually in here yet. I like it. I mean, there's a lot of people that are already talking about the heat. You saw ULM in their press conference talking about how much that rivalry is going to mean and has in the past, and to bring it back. So in the end, I think it's a good ad. Obviously, it's not a huge talking point as they don't jump into the conference officially this year or anything. But I don't know, TJ, are you more won over with this decision, or I don't know, where do you stand on the La Tech line?
I mean, I wasn't necessarily against La Tech coming into the conference. I'll be the first one to say that when we had the episode a couple weeks ago about realignment, I favored Western Kentucky over La Tech, and we broke that down. But I don't think that La Tech is a bad fit. I think that they do culturally fit with the Sun Belt. I think the biggest gripe that I've seen is that fans don't want to see 3 Louisiana teams, which is like, I get that, but at the same time, like, if La Tech was Tulane, we wouldn't be hearing that. So, like, I would just say that it's regional. It's going to help on travel, especially for the West, because most of those teams, I would say that, like, the East Division is more spread out up and down, but the West is all pretty right there. So, like, in terms of travel, it makes sense. In terms of football legacy, it makes sense. They've had a couple of down years, but this is a highly touted program over the course of the last century where they've had their success. So I don't think that La Tech's a bad fit by any means. I think that once you start to see how much the UL La Tech rivalry means, and how much the La Tech ULM rivalry means, and how entertaining those games are going to be moving forward now that they're conference games, I think people will forget about the gripe that they had about La Tech coming into the conference.
Yeah, and I think Southern Miss is a big one too, right? They had the previous history in Conference USA as well. We've got basketball listed here because he does make a comment today, Keith Gill, about basketball. La Tech, surprisingly, I mean, they're not Western Kentucky in basketball, but they're not bad. They're going to come in here and compete right away in 26 or 27, depending on which year they officially join. And we know they're going to fit right in with baseball. That's probably the most exciting part of the addition for anybody who's into baseball, is La Tech being a very competent, a very capable baseball program overall. And again, the heat with numerous West side teams that they will immediately have. There's not going to be any like need to juice these things up. It's going to exist, and it's going to come to the forefront very fast. As we know, baseball trash talk gets a little fun, as TJ has gotten to experience when was it that little matchup with Coastal and LSU here to end the season.
Yeah. we can skip that.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, basketball was touched on, so I do want to touch on that. He was asked, and Schultz had me on Locked On, was it a week and a half ago now, I believe, and we talked about basketball not being, unfortunately, a big sticking point. We need to get a little bit more prominence, a little bit more feature, a little bit more focus on the sport overall. And that comes with consistency. That was one of the key words I picked up on from Gill today about basketball. And I think that's an indirect push towards the coaches, the programs, the schools to spend a little bit more money and keep some of their players around. That's not easy to do because of where Sunbelt basketball currently sits. But were you excited maybe or just happy to hear him at least allude to the fact that he isn't standing pat, I guess? There's something happening in the background. What exactly that is obviously wasn't really said out loud, but it seems like he does want to help push basketball, but they also have to do a little bit of that pushing themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that I'm not really worried about when it comes to Commissioner Keith Gill and his philosophies on how he runs the Sun Belt Conference, it's the fact that he is passionate about basketball. I met him at the 2024 Final Four, where he didn't have anything to do. He wasn't a part of the selection committee yet. He just loves basketball and he wanted to go. And he used the fact that he was a Division I commissioner to go see a couple basketball games that weekend. I respect the hustle. I think that in addition to him also now being added to the committee, he is going to be in the room with all of those minds that are deciding what that field of 68 is going to look like. And I think that he is going to be integral for head coaches in the Sun Belt to be like, okay, this is what they're looking for. Like, we can be a multi-bid league, but we need to do the job at this level. Like you saw Arkansas State a couple of years ago. They had a run. Granted, that was Norshad Omier had a big thing to do with that right in the middle there of their success. But you have some talented basketball programs in the Sun Belt, but it's very top heavy. And one of the things that he said, which is true for both football and basketball, but he stressed on it in basketball, is you got to schedule better. You got to take some of your lumps early on with the promise or the hope that you're going to hit the jackpot. You're going to beat one of those teams and you're going to improve your net. And that's really all it comes down to. The Sun Belt just needs to schedule better out of conference. And they're starting to do that. I like the MAC challenge. I think that is a good, because there are some talented teams in the MAC as well that they would normally never even sniff the chance to play. So I like that. But now what can you do with the rest of your non-conference slate? Coastal Carolina a couple years ago, they hosted South Carolina, and that's an SEC school right at the beginning of the rise to prominence of SEC basketball, and they beat South Carolina. And Coastal Carolina has absolutely zero legacy when it comes to college basketball. So that was a huge win for them. What other in-state rivalries can you get? What big programs can you get? Are you going to take some lumps? Absolutely. But when you play those teams, that is appealing to recruits.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And like you said, I think actually that's a great mention. The prominence of SEC basketball could very much help the Sun Belt, right? I mean, it helps a little bit in football because you got some really easy travel days and times and opponents because you got so many of our teams within that same footprint that the SEC lies in. Let's do it for basketball too. All right. Like, SEC needs some scheduling help. Why not get the team that's right down the road? They seem to be the most prominent in these matchups back and forth in baseball. Bring that to basketball. We will help each other, right? Like, if you help schedule us, we get better, and then you get rewarded in your net for beating us.
It helps in travel because it is that close, like you said. It helps the Sun Belt with their net and their non-conference strength of schedule. And at the current state, if I'm just being honest, with most teams in the Sun Belt, it is going to be a win for the SEC team more often than not. So there's no reason for the SEC not to do it. And it only helps the Sun Belt. It doesn't help them in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, maybe you start to see some growth. And it's just a natural progression. You take your lumps early on. It's the same thing I said for football a couple weeks ago. You take your lumps early on. You just accept the fact that you're going to fight. Obviously, you don't ever go into a game thinking you're going to lose it, but you're probably going to lose it. But that helps you down the line, and that's the way that Keith Gill seems to want head coaches in the Sun Belt to schedule their non-conference.
Yeah, and like you said, you kind of expect a loss going in. If you're looking at it from conference slate, top to bottom, I'm not talking about specific matchups. We obviously don't know those. These are all hypotheticals. But you're talking about the SEC scheduling a Sun Belt team that's going to get you more points than scheduling a Southland team, unless you're talking about maybe McNeese State, who was obviously very good last year. But they did lose their head coach, so we'll see if they stay up there. Anyways, that's kind of what I'm alluding to. Sun Belt probably helps a little bit more than the smaller conferences that maybe have one team that ever gets anywhere far. So, yeah, it would just be good across the board in that regard. So I'm glad to see basketball mentioned. How about that? Baseball doesn't need mention. It's so good. It's like a power conference when it comes to baseball, I think. Obviously, you don't have the strength from top to bottom completely like an ACC or an SEC for baseball, but nobody else does. Those are the only two conferences in the country that from top to bottom are that strong. Sun Belt, to me, is a very clear and obvious third.
Multiple regional host sites, should have been 3 total participants last year, and a participant in the College World Series final. It is a power conference.
Yes. And that's going to only help with La Tech joining as well. Now, if we get ECU in there, man, we've got an easy power conference for baseball. All right, back to football at hand, though. CFP is the last thing mentioned. I did find this a little interesting because we've seen some commissioners say, I don't like more teams in the college football playoff, waters down the product, not as many people or his eyes are going to be interested. Keith Gill is on the opposite side of that spectrum, perfectly happy and content with staying at 12, but has said that he was fine to go to 14, 16. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about? I would assume that in his thought process, he's thinking it's easier for a Sun Belt team or a G5 team of any sort to get into the playoff field. I don't know if in that thought process he's thinking that 2 would then enter, because we know how that works, right? Just because more spots open up does not mean we get more seats at the table. It means the bigger schools get more seats at the table, but they still leave one for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. He wants more spots because there's more opportunities. Yes, the bigger school, I don't think that there's going to be, if they even go to 16 teams, that there's going to be more than one G5 representative. I just don't think that that's what the NCAA is going to do. I don't think that that's what, frankly, college football fans want to see, unless you have a story of a 2022 James Madison, a 2020 Coastal Carolina. Those are 2 teams that, they couldn't get a waiver for James Madison, so that's why they couldn't participate. I'm still a little confused as to why Coastal Carolina didn't get it in 2020 when they were one of the only conferences. The Sun Belt was one of the only conferences to get a full schedule in for the pandemic season. So when you have more spots, you're going to have more opportunities. And I think Coastal finished out of the top 12 for the New Year's Six. Out of the top 12, did they finish 13 or 14 or something like that? So you open it up in that year to a 16-team playoff. Coastal's in. James Madison, if they have a waiver, they're in. I think they'd be in a 12 with how they did in 2022. So I think that's what he's going for here. And I liked it. He said the more teams, the better. I think that that's completely fine. As long as he's then pushing for the Sun Belt teams to be represented and to have more consideration, which is what I actually typed into Zoom and asked him about. And he said that he would encourage the College Football Committee to look at the fact that they are the best non-autonomy group of 6 conference. They are the best outside of the top 4. And if we're being honest, when the Pac-12 comes back, or the Pac-9 or whatever we're going to call them nowadays, when they come back, Are they going to compete with the Sun Belt? I don't think so. I don't think it's not the same Pac-12. It carries a lot of weight, and I've said that in the past, but it's not the same Pac-12. So when the Pac-12 comes back, not allowing that name recognition to get in the way of there are some talented teams here in the Sun Belt, and I think that's where his head's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And some interesting aspects. We've got a couple of our teams going up against some future or current, depending on how you look at it, Pac-12 teams coming up just this season. So interesting. We won't get into those specifics tonight. But I think, was there any last words or things you wanted to wrap up from Keith Gill's appearance and talking points on the podium today?
No, just I liked everything I heard. Very excited to hear him speak because it means it's football season, which means now we can talk about the preseason polls.
Yep. And speaking of preseason polls, great segue into looking at what will be just the west side tonight. We will get to the east tomorrow night. We will save that part of the conversation. But TJ, I'll start off with asking you a question specifically. And I don't know if I really see much here, but were there any surprise locations for any teams for you in the coaches poll for the west side of the division?
I don't know if I would say surprised, but I would say pleased with the fact that Arkansas State is actually getting some recognition here. Phil Steele had Arkansas State at 6. Just about everybody else had Arkansas State not competing. And as we're going to talk about in a second, one of the only teams returning their quarterback, they're returning a 1,000-yard receiver. They're they have, and I'm sure that Ben James is going to be happy about this, but I think that Arkansas State was getting the what end of the stick for most of the offseason. And while they did lose a lot of key contributors, they've got people to fill them in, and they've got the transfers. And I don't know. I think, and Ben James is right. The big question is the defensive side, and we'll talk about that. But pleasantly, I would just say pleased that Arkansas State slides in there at number 3. I still think, and I might get some heat in the comments for this, that Southern Miss is a lot better than people think they are. Just because it's, I think a lot of people are discounting the fact that most of Marshall's, or I won't even say most, but a lot of key contributors for Marshall, including their quarterback, went over to Southern Miss with Charles Huff. I don't think they finish at 5. I think they finish top 3.
Yeah, I think I'll go on a limb and agree with you on that one. I do think they compete towards more of the top of this conference than the bottom. They had one win last year, but if you go back and really look too, and again, this is a totally different coaching staff, so you can't say like consistency here, but they had a few games that were actually close, and a few games that they had a chance to actually win. Not a bunch, but they had some. So, if you say without Huff and without these other additions, they could have flipped the script on 2 or 3 games, you're already looking at a kind of a vastly different thought process between a 1-win team and a 4-win team. Doesn't make you look any better in the standings overall, but as far as like listening to someone say they won 1 game, that's just a shocking statement to make. So I think they far outdo that total. I think they are a bowl eligible team. I will go as far as to say that. And then, I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're up at 3. And I picked A-State to be, I think, the West representative last year before the season started. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them climb up there and do that. That's a tall hill to climb. Texas State's now got a lot to play for as it is their official last season here in the Sun Belt. So they want to go out on top. I'm sure the Pac people would love to see them come over with a trophy, right? Like, hey, we're coming into the conference and we were last year's Sun Belt champs, right? So I think that's a sticking point for the rest of the West and not let them exit with a trophy. Maybe a little surprised to see ULM pick last. They had that hot start at 5-1 last year before falling off towards the end. But again, just like Southern Miss in a few games, even more for ULM. A lot of 1-score games there. So not a ton
a lot of 1-score games, but also the fact that, and that this was a big talking point that we'll talk about a little bit later, but ULM retained a ton of their team They had,
Yeah.
I believe he said, the highest retention in the Sun Belt. So not only do you have the 5-1 start, most of that team, but you also have a lot of guys that also endured the 6-game losing streak. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about intangibles a lot, and that's one of them. I don't know that ULM will finish last, but they've got, I would say in that scenario, they've got a lot to prove.
One quick thing before we move on to A-State, the first team that was on the podium this morning. To me, it's harder to pick who's going to end up last than it's going to be to pick who ends up first. I don't know why that is, but I have a hard time looking at any of these teams and be like, yeah, that team's obviously last. Do you have that problem?
I have that problem with I would say the West. This isn't a dig at the East or any particular team in the East, but I would say in the West in particular, there are, I would say, 4 teams minimum that could be the West representative in the Sun Belt Conference Championship, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't bat an eye at it. So it's very competitive in the West. So I don't think it's necessarily difficult because it's just difficult because it is so competitive, and the West is just such a volatile division, in my opinion, with how teams will go. You picked Arkansas State. Arkansas State, they ended with 8 wins, but I mean, Louisiana did Louisiana things last year, and I don't think anybody saw them winning 10 games like that. So, you know, I don't know. I think that the West is just a volatile division. So in this case, yes, it is very tough to pick who will be last.
Yeah, I guess the Cajuns being number one isn't totally shocking to me, but that comes from the fact that they've appeared in the Sun Belt Championship game 5 times out of the history of 7 total games. Not championships in name only. I'm talking about the championship game has only been around for 7 seasons, and they've been in that game 5 times. Not won it 5 times, but they get there. So to see them be number one in the West, there's obviously a reason why they continue to be picked up there towards the top to be that West representative. Did we want to mention anything about first and second teamers before we go on to coaches, or just jump right in?
I think we just jump right in.
Got it. Love it. All right. Butch Jones and Arkansas State, again, first team on the podium there in the Arts District of New Orleans today to start us off for Sun Belt Media Days on the West Side. TJ, anything that stuck out to you from head coach Butch Jones or either of the players, actually, that you heard from the Red Wolves this morning?
No, I'll tell you what stood out to me. It's the best quote of the day. Butch Jones, he's asked about the week 2 matchup with Arkansas, which, of course, the first part of that answer was, we're gonna focus on ourselves. We can't look ahead. Little coach speaky there. But then he turns it around and goes, what the difference between the Sun Belt and the SEC is? We don't buy our 4 wins. That was nuts. I love that. I love every part of that. He's just going right after him. I thought it was the best quote of the day, and I didn't see anybody talking about it. Loved that from Butch Jones. I think that something that they touched on a lot was just the fact that Jalen Rayner, 3rd year at Arkansas State. You barely see that for really any team in the country these days with the portal. So the fact that you can bring him back, and you can also bring back 1,000-yard receiver in Corey Rucker, and you can bring back Jaquez Cross at running back. Like, they've got the skill positions, at least one deep. They're elite. They are going to compete this year in the Sun Belt, and this is another bit of the reason why I am happy that Arkansas State's getting a little bit more recognition than they got just a couple weeks ago, and the reason that David Schultz at Locked On Sunbelt was losing his mind over the fact that nobody picked the Red Wolves and nobody gave them the time of day. So, yeah, this is the reason that all of a sudden when you talk to the coaches who are actually on the field against Butch Jones and the Red Wolves, yeah, they finished 3rd in the West according to the preseason poll. So that's the reason. I think that Arkansas State's in a really good spot, and Butch Jones thinks so too. He said that he's never been more excited about where they're at. That's a direct quote from him.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Rayner coming back second season or second off season, I guess I should say, at the Manning Passing Academy, of which the first time he was graded out as the best accurate thrower. I forget the official title of what he won, but he was considered the best quarterback pretty much. The easy, quick way to say that. So he continues to tool up. I've noticed that he kind of was a lot like a lot of Sun Belt quarterbacks when he first came into the league, used his legs a little bit more to help him in his game because he could just tuck and run and he had all the tools to do so. He can still do that, and he does do that, but he has become much more of a pocket passer and a much better pocket passer than when he first entered in the league. So I expect him to kind of continue to evolve there. Corey Rucker, as you said, had his name in the NFL draft. In fact, we had him on our draft show as a focus point, but he had taken his name back out. That's why it was a little confusing. He was showing up on some draft boards. He wasn't showing up on others. I'm like, I don't know where to place this guy. And it turns out the reason he wasn't showing up on some draft boards is because he took his name out to come back to A-State. So that is a massive win because he was going to get a shot in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if he would have been drafted necessarily. Definitely would have got a tryout with a NFL team. So that's going to be a massive tool coming back. And Brandon Barnes' big focus point, at least from Butch Jones, was his leadership. He was kind of a quieter guy last year. He's using his voice a little bit more in the locker room now. This year coming around, he even had a little joke about him coming from prom because of how he was dressed so fancy today with the little
the suit was fly. The suit was fly.
It was a good suit.
I don't know what that's called, but it was
Carnation. Carnation. That's what it is.
Carnation. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, cross returns, that guy's electric, right? I mean, he's a smaller guy, but speedy guy, very much capable of doing utility guy, literally. I mean, that's what he is. He could probably throw the ball if he had to, because we know he can run, catch, and return the ball. One last thing, you got to ask head coach a question. I sent one in for Rayner. He is a Kernersville, North Carolina native. Arkansas State finishes the year at App State. He mentioned it being only about an hour and a half from where he grew up and went to high school in Winston-Salem. He's going to have a ton of family, friends, and he even mentioned that he has some students at App State that he's friends with who will obviously be attending that game. So a really cool way to him to, in all likelihood, wrap up his Sun Belt career and do it in front of probably the most amount of people that he knows personally. So that's kind of a cool one. Why I wanted to ask that question of him. So a cool little tidbit for him to finish out there. Any more notes on Arkansas State here before we move on?
I mean, I would just echo what Ben James commented before. The question marks are on the defense, but one of the look at that. But the biggest change, in my opinion, is the fact that they've got a new DC. Griff McCarley was the linebacker coach last year, and everyone that was there today that had anything to do with the defensive side of the ball, so basically Butch Jones and Brandon Barnes, they both love what McCarley's doing. They say he elevates the defense. They really like some of the defensive backs that they've got in there, some of the transfers they've got in there. So I think that Griff McCarley's a guy to watch. Defense is going to dictate the success of the Red Wolves, but they've got too many electric, as you said, skill position players for them to not at least compete. That's all I'll say. The Red Wolves could do something this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the unsung heroes of any football team, but not so much for A-State. They've been on this train for a long time. They've been really proud of their special teamers, their punters, their kickers, and they have the first official special teams player of the year the Sun Belt has ever given out, going to Clune Van Andel, which is just a cool name. Like, I just think of Claude Van Damme every time I see his name, and I'm like, this is going to be a fun one to say all season. But a junior kicker, I think they mentioned on the broadcast, Matt Stewart, I believe, he nailed a 52-yarder, I believe, at one point last year. So he's got a hell of a leg on him. And it's obvious to see why he was named Special Teams Player of the Year for the preseason awards. The only one that was considered, all three offensive, defensive, and special teams players of the year are in the West Side, though. So we will see the rest of them tonight. Big thing to note there. And Ben James saying, hope Red Wolves dog walks Arkansas. I think we'd all love to see that. I mean, I don't know how many people are really Arkansas fans.
I envy your confidence there. I'm rooting for you, but that is quite the adjective.
Yeah, dog walks. Yeah, that's a strong way to say that. I would love to see it.
The Razorbacks don't see that.
Yeah, just to win the game would be awesome. So I just win. I don't care if you win by 1 point or 25 points, but just win the game. That would be phenomenal. Texas State enters their last official season as a member of the Sun Belt Conference. There was really only one question anybody wanted to ask here, TJ, and it had to do with realignment. Surprise, surprise, right?
Yeah, surprise, surprise. But that's also why, no disrespect to GJ, Kinney, or Texas State, but that's the reason that their portion of the press conference kind of sucked, because the reporters didn't get the hint. It's nothing Texas State did. The reporters didn't get the hint. The first question was, what about the Pac-12? And they said, we want to focus on the Sun Belt this year. And they said, but you're going to the Pac-12. I said, but we're going to focus on the Sun Belt this year. And then the questions just got stale. But the few things that we did get from Texas State, QB battle, there's 4 capable guys there. Redshirt freshman Brad Jackson, he's the only guy that's returning. They've got 3 transfers coming in. Holden Grinner is, I believe, how you said that was pronounced. Kinney said that was one of the best arms that they've ever had, and he's an elite decision maker. So he's a guy to watch, Holden Grinner. And if I can get it up really quick, I do have, just because he mentioned on Locked On Sunbelt, Dave Schultz has his copy of Phil Steele, and so do I. I picked that up.
While you do that, Lincoln Perry is a name that I remember well from last year. So, and I know you took that note there, but a big returner at running back. We know Ishmael Mahdi, who was a big focal point going into last season, kind of that 2-headed monster. They even really had a 3-headed monster there for a little bit. But Perry was just elite as well. So for him to return is a big tool in their toolbox, especially with a little bit of a question mark as to who the quarterback will be. I don't think it's going to be any problem of who it will be capable. But if there is a game or two at the beginning of the season where they need to give a shot to 1 or 2 guys to really solidify that, at least you've got a solid base at the running back position to establish that run game.
Well, to round out the QB battle, so Brad Jackson, redshirt freshman, only returner. Holden Grinner, one of the best arms they've ever had. The guy that Phil Steele says is going to win that battle is Keldrick Luster, who is a transfer, also a guy that Kinney recruited while he was at Incarnate Word. So that's another name to watch. And then Nate Yarnell, guy coming off of injury, 6'6". They say he's closer to 6'7". You've got Aaron Judge under center for Texas State potentially. So those are the 4 names. It's going to be one of those 4. Keldrick Luster, Holden Grinner probably have the edge, in my opinion, based on what we heard today. But you got 4 guys that are capable of getting the job done. But Lincoln Perry, like you said, huge returner. He had over 500 rushing yards last year. But you've also got, coming in off the transfer portal, sophomore Greg Burrell, who Phil Steele says will get the starting role. So you've got 2 capable guys in that running back room. Texas State is going to continue to build off of last year.
Absolutely. And you took a note here that the players spoke about why they didn't leave, why they love this coaching staff so much. I mean, it's easy to see that, right? I mean, we've literally seen a number of Incarnate Word transfers follow Kenny to Texas State. So why would they want to leave? They talked about the family aspect being so strong. Kenny has a big, decent sized family of his own. And I, again, allude to the fact that last year I talked to him about the video game. I was talking to the players about the video game and how much they get to play it. Because I alluded to the fact that the coach has got a family, he probably never gets to touch it. He was like, hey, no, I actually do get to play with these guys, and I hold my own pretty well. So he wanted to remind me of that. Still a little bit of a kid at heart. So I feel like not only does he have that father figure type mentality and aspect that you want in a head coach, but he's also got that young youthfulness to him that makes him fun and have these guys desire to be around him as well. So I think that's important.
Was just going to bring that up. He's a younger coach. He can connect with those players. He is a smart head coach. He's a quarterback in his playing career. And just everything that you hear coming out of that camp is how much they love to play for him. So those are pretty much the three ways to succeed, especially in the Sun Belt. Young, relatable, and smart. That's, he checks all those boxes. So it's going to be it's upsetting that we only get him for another year. But it should be a great final hurrah for him.
Yeah, I think so too. And we don't know what the future holds, but it'll be hard for Texas State to hold on to him. Honestly, I think that's how good of a coach he is and where his ceiling could be. So best of luck to Texas State. But not too much, right? Because they're still in this conference for another year. We'll wish them better luck when they go to the Pac. And hopefully they start destroying people out there and be like, look, this is how good this Sun Belt was because they weren't winning like that here or whatnot. Anyways, moving on to the Warhawks of ULM. Look, in this graphic, I had ULM spelled out, and then I saw their logo also just has ULM, and I'm like, I got to change this one. So if you see that, and you notice that if you're watching along, this one spells out Warhawks over here. But Bryant Vincent, pretty impressive at the podium, man. I liked him last year, but didn't really know enough about him and whether he was just kind of being a little bit of a tough guy, persona because we didn't know much about him. But he brought it again this year, and you could just tell he's like a fiery guy. I loved
it. I got to say, before I said Arkansas State, Butch Jones had the bombshell of the entire day. Right, with that quote. And that still reigns true because it came out of nowhere, right? It just kind of snuck up on us. Bryant Vincent got up to the podium and was like, all right, look. And you knew it was, oh, okay, here we go. But, yeah, he was fiery. He acknowledged the fact that they're picked 7th in the West in the coaches poll, and College Football Live has them picked last overall in the conference. And he said, we don't have a chip on our shoulder. We have a boulder. There's no place we'd rather be. I love it. Like I said, this has this is the highest retention rate in the Sun Belt. You've got guys who have experienced that 5-1 start with a win over James Madison, I might add.
People forget that. That's a great point.
People forget that. It's a win over James Madison. It's 5 good wins. And then a loss, of course, to that was who did they lose to? Power conference team, Texas. They lost to Texas, number 1 team in the nation.
Most of our teams probably would have lost to Texas last year. So
so you got guys who have contributed to the 5-1 start. You also have guys that have gone through the 0-6 finish. I think that intangibles matter. I think that the fact that those guys wanted to come back matters. And I expect them to do a lot better this year.
Yeah, I think.
And I got some hate from ULM fans last year. I got some hate for ULM fans last year. But yeah, I think that they'll be just fine this year.
Yeah, I like you said with Butch Jones kind of having your favorite comment of the day, like you said with Vincent's, that was my favorite. We don't have a chip on our shoulder. We have a boulder. And like you said, I like how you added the part that I didn't put that part, but that's just how we like it. Oh man, I loved it.
Fire. That's what you need as a head coach for football.
Yeah, and this shirt was given to us by Coach Fed from baseball program, who's obviously no longer there now. But I still wear this thing with pride when I wear it around because they're just always battling. They're battling for respect. They're battling for acknowledgement. They're battling because everyone just wants to consider them an also-ran. You've got people that are all over Twitter saying they need to drop down to FCS. There's not just one or two. That's a lot. There's a lot of people saying those types of things. So these guys want to prove it not only for themselves, but for their school, for their area of the state. And now with La Tech coming in, I mean, that's an even bigger part part of the equation, right? So, yeah, I mean, they had, I think, 17, guys from Monroe or West Monroe on their roster last year. So a lot of pride coming out of that area, and head coach Bryant Vincent is a huge part and reason for that. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, I'm pumped to see what this team can do. Like you said, the retention factor is not spoken about enough. There's a little bit of a reason in my mind that Army and Navy did so well in college football last year. They don't have turnover in the academies, right? Like there's a group that's grown together, and there's a little bit of turnover here at ULM, but there's not a lot. So like you said, this is an interesting team here to me, a very interesting team. We'll see what they're capable of.
And it's another team that retains their starting quarterback in Aiden Armenta. It's a team that brings in Deshaun Ford, a redshirt freshman from Arkansas. So you've got a guy, Brian Vincent was saying, like, this is a guy that looks different genetically. Like, he just looks different. And so that's a guy to keep your eye on. He's most likely going to get the starting role. Everybody seems to think so anyway. So yeah, I just think that this team, they stayed together, which tells me something about that locker room, and they got better with who they brought in, and they kept their quarterback. I picked ULM a couple years ago as a dark horse. I'll pick them again now. ULM's my dark horse.
Yeah,
I'll stick with that.
Defense wins championships, and that was ULM's strong point. Their weak point was scoring points on offense. If they can get their offense to match what their defense did last year, yeah, I'm with you. Watch out. This team could not only be not at the bottom, but they could be competing towards the top. Again, we already know they were in some close games without being able to score the ball very well last year. I think Hardy had scored as many touchdowns or more touchdowns than their quarterback threw for, which is like insane, right? So we'll have to see how it plays out. But I'm excited to watch what Vincent and the Warhawks continue to put out on the field on the west side, and we'll stay obviously over towards that area with another team in red. There's a lot of red teams or maroon teams in the western part of this conference, and there spares no expense for Troy to be next with one of the coolest names in all of Sunbelt football, all of college football, really, in Goose Crowder. Did you see the talking point when Rocky Boyman was talking to him about how the name came about?
It had something to do with Top Gun, right?
Yes. Yeah. It is a very obvious allude to the movie Top Gun, which if you are younger and watching or listening to this, you need to go watch Top Gun, first of all, one of the best movies of all time, but just a great chemistry there with an all-time nickname of Goose. So he's kind of adopted.
Here's a hot take for you. Here's a hot take for you. Top Gun Maverick's better.
I
had a feeling you weren't going to like that.
No. I would say I don't totally disagree with that. I mean, it's harder for me to say because, you know, your first experience only lasts one time, right? Like you see Top Gun for the first time one time when you're a kid, when it was even cooler then. But now with the special effects and the way Tom Cruise shoots movies with it, like the realism, like he's doing a lot of the stunts. This is not a whole lot of CGI. Like I don't totally disagree with you there. I think it's still 1 and 2 to me, but it's a very, very close 1 and 2 where the sequel is right there on par.
Now I'll clarify now that I've said the crazy comment. It's you have to watch the original in order to appreciate the second one, but the second one's a better movie.
Yes. I will agree with that part for sure. Like the second one's not going to be nearly as good, even though it would still be fine. But the understanding of what it means and why it means so much as a movie is only going to come across if you watch that first one for sure. Okay, back to the football at hand. Yeah, no, I like that because that's fun. I didn't know people's feelings on Top Gun. Maybe we'll have some comments shared here about the movie Top Gun as well.
Tell me why I'm an idiot when it comes to Top Gun.
One thing I like that Parker said, and this part was not on the podium. This was with Matt Stewart. He said he wanted to be ahead in year 2. Obviously, on the scoreboard is part of that equation, but that's not really what he meant when he said that. What he meant was be more urgent, be more prepared. And so that also talks about being that way in practice. And so I think that's important to have heard from him, because we know what Troy expects as a fan base to be put out on the field for their entertainment every season. And this past year, obviously didn't meet those expectations. And I think Parker even realized I could do more, right? I'm learning as a head coach, but now I feel more comfortable. He even says he is more comfortable already in leading. He was learning how to do that last year. And I think that's perfectly fine and acceptable. He was a first-year head coach. But we saw how that kind of rounded into form towards the end of the season. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what Parker can do with this Troy team in year 2. Goose did not get to play a whole lot last year. So they're coming back with a better quarterback situation immediately to start with. What were your thoughts on the Troy Trojans while they were on our screens today?
Well, I will echo your sentiment. I loved Gerard Parker's energy. I loved what he brought to the podium. I also loved everything that I heard from Goose Crowder and Devin Lafayette. You had two guys who understand the tradition, the culture that is Troy football, especially in the Sun Belt, because they have had immense success. And if I'm not mistaken, they're going to play. Are they playing Tulane, or who's playing Tulane this year? I could be wrong on that.
Think it's
but someone's going up against John Summerall. I thought it was Troy. Anyway, I just think that the big thing with them is, can they get it done on the ground? They said that they were going to be running by committee. They were going to have a bunch of different guys contributing there. Secondary, on the defense, the defensive backs, they had big pickups in the portal. Devin Lafayette is that clear leader, that senior leader. So I like where Troy's at. I think that the problem for Troy is less about themselves and more about the rest of the West. It's kind of the same problem that I was going to bring up for Southern Miss. It's this West Division is incredibly competitive this year. So Crowder gonna have to step up. He doesn't have a ton of returning receivers. I think his top returning receiver is Peyton Higgins with 301 yards. So they're gonna have to find guys that step up. But it's Troy, and you can never really count them out.
Yeah,
it is South Alabama. Okay.
Yeah. Troy fans aren't going to like the fact that you mixed up South Alabama with Troy.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry.
But
you have to understand. You have to understand, everybody at home, that the way that I watched was I had the broadcast up on the TV, because unfortunately we couldn't go down. That just kind of fell through. We're going to get there next year. We've already decided that. But I had the broadcast, which switched between press conference and studio show, up on the TV, and on my laptop I had the Zoom for media, so that we could watch the press conference uninterrupted. And there's so much going on. That was such a terrible way to do that. I'm not doing that tomorrow for the East. But yeah, my bad on that. Some of my stuff's mixed up tonight.
Yeah, I went to another level. So I was at my desk at work, right? I already have 3 screens. I can't use those for extracurriculars, right? So I had a phone with the ESPN Plus running. I had my tablet that I brought to work running the Zoom, and I had one headphone in for the tablet and one headphone in for the phone. Now I did take it out when it was when it was like the same view and everything. Obviously, I took one out.
That is psycho behavior.
It was tough. I was literally trying to go back and forth taking notes on both. So we really brought it for you guys today. Unfortunately, I got pulled away from the desk after a while.
I hadn't heard about that. You're a sicko. That's ridiculous.
Well, there's only one way to make sure you don't miss anything.
I love college football. I don't know that I love college football that much. That's absurd.
Well, we got to practice, or when we're doing live shots and we have stuff in our ear, right? So it's just practice. So you just got 2 different people talking.
I can tell you from someone who's used an IFB that you only have the one. You had a second one, you're psycho. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, the people that have checked out this show in the past might remember one from, I think it was football season. I believe it was. Maybe it was baseball. Anyway, I had a headset on because I had this terrible echo. So everything that was being said by anybody, myself including, was all echoing back to me again in the headphones. But if I did anything to adjust it, I would have ended the stream. And I was like, I can't do that. I got to power through. But it was awful. I mean, I thought I was going crazy for a little bit. So
Got voices in your head, literally.
yeah, I literally did have voices in my head. Some of them were my own. So yeah, but back to the Troy thing. um, they yeah, I think they're going to rebound quite well. I mean, again, I don't know if I'm one of those believers that, just because you ended the season strong means you start the season strong next year. That doesn't mean that. But it does help, right? It does help the mentality going into the next year. Hey, we can do it. We finished on a high note. Why can't we start that way? So I think the players will have that in mind, and we'll see if Troy can get back up to the top here. I didn't see if there's anything else that really is on your mind here.
I mean, just to put a bow on it, I think just one other thing to watch, it is another fair point to bring up the fact that Goose Crowder was injured for most of last year. So how does he respond from that? I mean, everybody's talking about how he's a very talented quarterback. How does he respond to how does he recover from the injury? I think that's a storyline that you should keep your eyes on. But Troy, I think that they will be solid. They'll be a tough game. Just not sure at this moment where they stand compared to the rest of the West.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. They are still a question mark as far as like how high or low I'm putting them, but I'm definitely leaning toward putting them higher than I am lower because I think
they're going to be solid. Just don't know how solid yet.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, that's a really important part of Goose's recovery here. Was those injuries were the same? They were 2 concussions. So he can really ill afford to have another, right? We know that they're like keeping track of this stuff better than they ever have before. We want people to have long, healthy lives outside of football. So hopefully they can keep him, the offensive line can do their job, keep him upright as much as possible so that he can make it through an entire season. Because, again, they're going to go as far as Goose goes, I think, is kind of the easy, short way to say that. I think even Parker kind of alluded to that at points in the press conferences today. Southern Miss, the most talked about offseason between them and Marshall, I guess, because you've really got both sides of it. But head coach Charles Huff moves from Sun Belt champions Marshall Thundering Herd down to Southern Miss, who won exactly 1 game, as we know. What do we have to look forward to with Huff here? He had a lot to say to start off at the podium, right, TJ?
Oh, yeah. I didn't put a timer on it, but I would not be surprised if someone told me his opening remarks were 7 minutes long. I love listening to him talk, but he talked for a while and had a lot to say.
Yeah. And I think that's probably okay because there's a lot of people that want to hear him talk. What is he going to say? Is he going to talk about leaving Marshall? Is he going to just move on completely to everything Southern Miss, which obviously, you do. Just like Texas State's not going to talk all about the Pac-12 right now. It's just doesn't make sense. Why would he sit there and talk about the past? He's at Southern Miss. We move forward. What are the expectations going into this year? I think just like Troy, you go with how well Braxton does for you at the quarterback position, because that's going to be the biggest change and aspect besides the head coaching part of the staff on the field that fans are going to see. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be a roster flip, a coaching staff flip, and I don't know. Do you think we're going to see a record flip as well?
I think that Southern Miss, we kind of talked off stream about, Southern Miss's, I guess, perception in terms of, Sun Belt fan bases and how I got to tell you that when Charles Huff took over Marshall, or didn't even take over Marshall, when Marshall came into the Sun Belt in 2022 and we heard Charles Huff for the first time, that was, I loved what I heard from him. I loved his just the way that he spoke about the game. But you really couldn't tell at least from like Sunbelt media perspective and us just that we were covering the game, you couldn't tell yet whether or not he just knew how to talk to the media or if he really believed what he said.
Gotcha.
And the more that you watched him at Marshall and the more that you watched that program grow all the way up to the climax of a Sun Belt championship last year, I love everything that he says. I think that he stands for the right things as a coach. I did want to talk about this. I think that he said this is a human game. Can't put a win-loss total on success. Charles Huff doesn't care if they go 1-11, if they go 0-12, or if they go 12-0. As long as on and off the football field, his guys are getting better in some way, shape, or form. And that's a quality that, especially in college football, especially at this level of college football, no disrespect, and I'm not putting anybody under the bus here, but coaches that are looking to climb the ladder, they lose that sometimes. And he just he went across conference. Like this was technically a lateral move for Charles Huff. And he just wants to continue to build a program. And you saw just how much of an impact he has when you watched basically the entire Marshall team go with him. Like this, I think that a lot of people are not giving Southern Miss the credit based on how he runs a program and based on who came over with him. I know that there was I don't know if you had the time to make that a graphic.
Yes.
You did? Okay, put that graphic up. There was there was a comment on Twitter.
Yep.
There was a comment on Twitter, and it had something to do with USM is lipstick on a pig, and people need to realize that. I don't think people need to realize that at all. And I mean, you go down and you look at what the next guy said. They're Marshall, but without all of these different pieces. I'm sorry that he brought a ton of producers over with him. He is who he is, and he runs a program the way that he runs a program. I like the way that Southern Miss looks. I think that they have the potential to flip the script. Do I think it's going to be 10 wins? We'll see. We'll see how they gel. But this is Huff is bringing over a lot of his guys, one of which is the quarterback and the preseason player of the year. So I'm sorry that Southern Miss is in a much better spot than the 1-11. So let's start recognizing the fact that there's a very real possibility that Southern Miss goes from last to first in the Sun Belt. It's a very real possibility. And I think that it is unfair to think that just because it's his first year, it's this, it's that. It's unfair to think that he does not have the tools right now to do it. Now, with my luck, they'll go 4-8. But this is a team that has the potential to flip the script and just go from last to first in the West.
Yeah. And one of the great, again, we talked about a couple great quotes today. He said they were picked to finish, or they picked the team that won last year to finish fifth, which he said was actually too much credit, right? Like he ends up saying that it actually should have been picked last because they won one game. So it's interesting, I guess, and good to see how fast he's bought in. I mean, almost immediately when they were done talking to him, as they were going to try to cut the break or change over to whoever's at the podium next, because this was when they were in the Superdome studios, he goes to the top, right? Like he almost interrupts, I think it was Matt Stewart, where they were going to cut away from them. I mean, he's completely bought in. It didn't feel forced or fake. Like it felt very normal for him to try and get that out before they tried to move on. So yeah, I think we're going to see some stuff. I know he's talked about the chemistry needs to come together, right? And he even kind of had this let's be realistic about this first matchup against an SEC team, but I'm kind of with Schultz on that one. And I think that's a very real possibility that Southern Miss surprises the heck out of those Bulldog fans and could walk out of Mississippi State with a win. It wouldn't shock me one bit.
Yeah.
It's to a lot of things, right? Like, how do you prepare for a team and a school that has totally flipped the script, that you don't really know how they're going to run things? Of course, you can use some things from Marshall last year, but you don't know for sure if that's going to stay that way. So there's a lot for them to prepare for that they don't know what's going to be coming at them. So I think that's a big tool. And you've got Braylon Braxton holding the ball on that other end, just, the offensive player of the year for the Sun Belt. So there is another big reason to think that they could have a massive year, certainly a year that a lot of people think they will flip where they landed last year. Any last thoughts on Huff and Southern Miss Golden Eagles before we move on to the Cajuns?
No, just mark my words. They Southern Miss could very well win the West this year.
Yep. I wouldn't put it past them. I don't know if I quite have them at the very top, but I definitely have them towards the top. How about that? We won't say to the top, but we'll say towards the top.
Still SMTTP. It's fine.
There you go. Yeah, that's true. It does still ring true.
Oh, it's not P. I'm sorry. Top is still a T. My bad. That's
yeah. I knew what you meant.
I'm dyslexic. That's my bad.
All right. Now getting back to the team that has reached the championship game 5 out of 7 times. If you want to say 5 out of the last 7 years, you can say that too. But we've only had the championship game for the last 7 years. So either way, Coach Michael DeZormo leading the Ragin' Cajuns out from a brand new look at their renovated stadium. And I believe they are still yet to put the turf down. I think that's arrived on site, and I don't think it's even laid down just yet at what was the very original swamp. That's right, Florida Gator fans. The original swamp was in Lafayette, Louisiana. What did you think about the Cajuns and their time in front of us today?
I liked everything Coach Des had to say. You're going to hear that a lot from me. I liked everything that I heard from these guys. I love the fact that we get to watch media days, get to see a whole bunch of different schools from a whole bunch of different, I would say, situations, and they all come together and they tell you exactly what, and it feels very honest at Sunbelt Media Days. It does not feel very Coach Speaky, except for GJ Kinney at Texas State, just based on how hot topic of an issue that is. But I don't fault him for that. I liked what I heard from Des. I think that Louisiana, based on everything he said, based on everything that we're looking at, they are in a great spot. They're picked to finish first in the West. They've got Walker Howard coming in, transfer from Ole Miss. They've also got an LSU transfer, Shelton Sampson, wide receiver, which at one point was a top 10 recruit in his class. I think that was 2023. But yeah, so Louisiana has a very serious couple of guys at quarterback and wide receiver, and then they return a decent chunk of their core. That was the Sun Belt runner-ups next year. I think that I think that Louisiana, it felt very much last year like a disappointment based on the final score of the Sun Belt Championship. But that was a great team. That was a 10-win team last year. That was a great team. And they bring
Wake Forest in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, that was a great team last year. And they bring a decent chunk of them back, a solid core. I don't know. They lose 7 starters on defense. So once again, defense is the question mark, but they do bring back guys like Kadarius Miller, Chase Edwards, Cameron Whitfield. Des says that he's very excited about his corner position. I think there's 8 corners that are all fighting for snaps. So I don't know. I think Louisiana's in a solid spot. I don't think there's much else you can really say about them other than they're going to be competitive once again.
Yeah, the important thing, like you said, is the quarterback position. We've kind of talked about that. They lost their top 4 wide receivers. So, like you said, that transfer coming in from LSU is vastly important to get them on the board early with maybe, some familiarity between them because Walker Howard, like you said, did spend some time at LSU as well. I don't know how much they got to do things together while they were there, but there may be some familiarity there. And my dark horse as far as a player that you may not have heard much from or anything from really if you haven't been paying attention to the Cajuns is still Lunch Winfield. I think you said his official government name there. But yeah, he's a guy I think you just can't help but get on the field. If he's not going to be quarterback one, he's going to be in all kinds of packages to get the ball in his hands because he seems to just be a playmaker there for them. But yeah, there's a lot of excitement, and some of it has to do with having a very new feel to the stadium. But there's going to be some excitement once they hit the field as well down there in Lafayette. And I gotta
quickly before sorry, no, put that back. I know what you're grabbing. Just go back to Louisiana for a second.
Okay.
We didn't talk about their running back room. That's
right.
That's
Bill Davis,
a huge running back room. Bill Davis and Zylan Perry, two guys that were over 700. Were they both over 700? No, Perry was just under at 695, but
barely.
They both come back. Top two rushers come back. They lose the top four receivers, but they bring in a guy like Shelton Sampson and a quarterback like Walker Howard. They could be dangerous. That this offense could just click.
Yeah, it very much could. Speaking of clicking, I think you're going to hear my bones click as I try to put on
put the full screen on.
Full screen? Okay, we'll go full screen for this. All right, this is a Houston, and I don't know his first name. He's a little bit older, as you can see. This is a older.
It's a retro
Sunbelt logo there, but the little Nike Flywire. So let's throw this on. We got our last team up here for the night. Have a little fun here. South Alabama Jaguars getting represented here. Like I said, it's a little tight, little jersey tightness, but we're gonna try and put it on for you. For the Jags fans, oh man, I would feel bad if someone had like really big arms here too. Look at this. I got the
now try to fit the shoulder pads underneath.
No, yeah. Well, try to fill it out here. Like, let's go. But
well, you just did 14 workouts in 14 days, so
that's true.
You're filling it out quite nice.
That's the downside to not going to Sunbelt Media Days. That whole thing was thought up to build some type of thing going into being down there in person in New Orleans. Obviously, like we said, that for a few reasons that didn't happen. But we do get to still do this. So we still paid attention. We took notes doing this to bring the people that could not watch it live like some of us could. And like I said, I got pulled away a little bit at work, but TJ and I were trying to coordinate. And shout out to your friend who also helped us take a bunch of notes. Good thing, because when I got pulled away, I think the two of you were still going at it. So that was good. So we
got
could be
done.
prepared here tonight. But yeah, South Alabama Jaguars. We talked a little bit beforehand. I think Major Applewhite surprised me with how kind of like fast-paced his speech was today. Not nervous-wise, like it's just kind of how he talks. But I've told you, like, a lot of the other coaches in this conference are kind of a little bit slower talking, a little bit more of the preacher kind. Like Parker, for me, is like he could be a guy that's you stand up, sit down in the pew and listen to him on a Sunday, right? Like that's just kind of how his voice is. He's got that rhythm, that tone. But Applewhite talks a little bit faster. So it was just an interesting dynamic when you see somebody come up that's a little bit different as far as the coaches go and gives a little bit more energy to it, I'd say. But interesting aspect here with the Jags. I don't know what to make of this team, right? This one's kind of like maybe even a bigger question mark than ULM to me. I don't know.
Well, I'll say that the one not question mark about this team is they've got the best linebacker room in the conference. One of those guys is sitting down there. The other guy is sitting on the other slide. Darius McKenzie, redshirt senior from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, of all places. He's coming back to just fill out this room with the Sunbelt preseason Defensive Player of the Year. It is just that is the big piece of this, is that I think the defense is going to be just fine. It's the offense that maybe there's some question marks. Transfer quarterback Zach Pyron, maybe he gets the job, but you lose a lot of contributors. 9 key contributors last season on the offensive side of the ball. 7 of them went in the last portal opportunity in spring ball. So it's tough turnover for South Alabama. They had to figure out a lot of things over the summer. But I think the defense is going to be solid. I think this is going to be another one of those real tough South Alabama teams, especially up the middle, especially on the run game. Just got to see what happens with the offense.
Yeah, I think that offense would have felt a little bit different had Gio Lopez not got pulled away by UNC. And again, you can't fault a kid who got offered that much money. What was it, like $4 or $5 million? It's yeah, I mean, look, South Alabama's not going to offer that, and it's fine. It's just what's going to happen. And it's great for Gio Lopez as a person. I mean, he gets to continue to grow his career and get paid handsomely to do so. So there it is. But Davenport is one I would watch at the quarterback position. I know we've got this transfer Pyron we just talked about, but Davenport really wasn't a huge drop-off to me from Gio Lopez, especially when it came time for him to come into the games late and try and win some of those games late when he came in. I was impressed with how he played. I was impressed with how he looked. And again, just like we've talked about, a little bit more of the feet than the arm, but if he can bring that arm along and still give you the excitement and the speed really from the quarterback position as he carries the ball downfield, I think they're going to be okay. It's just, I just question how it all comes together, right? Like that's my only question. But like you said,
yeah,
Blaine Myrick, Sunbelt Defensive Player of the Year at the linebacker position. So like you said, linebacker core is not part of any of that concern. They're moving forward, and I think that is it for the 7 teams. We do have some other comments that we had got from some fans on Twitter, so we'll take a look at that right now. Deshaun Walker said he was very impressed with the confidence in ULM head coach on what he's doing to change the culture and perspective in ULM football. Our resident JMU fan, I think Cnogs. I don't know if it's a CI or a CL.
It's an I. It's for Signetti.
Synogs. Gotcha. That makes more sense now. Well, he was also impressed with Bryant Vincent, and it was a JMU guy, Dave Riggert, who was actually interviewing him that he heard on the radio while he was driving. So interesting that we all kind of agree with that. I mean, I think all of us were impressed with ULM's kind of presentation of everything. And they also had that new helmet they showed off. Not as cool as last year's helmet, right? They had a black version with the circle and the star in it. Last year they had the, was it P40? Is that am I getting the name of the plane right for the helmet? And they wore that quite a few times.
What, the P47 Mustang? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. They had that.
Is it 57? I don't know. Correct me in the comments.
Yeah, but it's a great look. It was probably one of the better helmets on all of college football last year. I got to see that thing. They brought it in person for the first time. They'd released it like 2 days before Sunbelt Media Days, and then it showed up there in person, and it's sharp looking. So they wore that quite a bit. It'll be interesting to see what they do with this black one. I'd assume it's going to be worn with the black jersey, but they may be able to mix and match, which they did often a lot last year. And then Sean Walker said GJ Kenny may be the least like Presser with the chip on his shoulder mentality. Very blah, because they've been picked high to win it the past 2 to 3 years and underperformed. So it's a valid point. You know, chip on your shoulder when you've been told that you are likely to compete towards the top of this conference for the last couple of years. We'll have to see if they can do it in their last chance here. But again, I think also chip on your shoulder is probably coming from a lot of different angles now. Like, can you perform here before you make it to this Pac-12 and, blah, blah. So I think I can see why he's saying a chip on the shoulder, though.
I mean, I would just offer to say that 2 straight 8-win seasons I don't think that's underperforming. But other than that, I I see what he's talking about. But then again, like I said, I didn't like the presser because the room didn't seem to get that they didn't want to talk about realignment. So
Right.
that's all I'll offer to that. I think 2 straight 8-win seasons is consistency, if nothing else.
Yeah, and you got to think that this is a team that had to flip what was happening, right? Like this isn't a team that was winning 8 games in a row
Yeah.
or games a season for the
Kinney
last.
came on campus and flipped the script.
Yep.
I.
So I think you have to give him some time. I think what he's done, and now if he succeeds this year, then you say, yeah, this is it. I mean, this is year 3 is typically that, like, you're shooting off here. Not so much anymore a transfer portal NIL deal, but that was the old school thought process, and we'll see if it reigns true. One last note that I have specifically is, again, this part is not the new part, but offensive, defensive, and special teams players of the year all reside on this side. They're all in the West. But I did want to note, we're looking at first team, second team offense and defense. I'll just go with the totals because there's a whole lot of numbers if I don't just pull the totals. But the East, in those first, second team with the offense, defense, and special teams included, has 29 represented in total, while the West has 27. So there's some mixing and some matching and some stuff that's going to look a little uneven. But when you do the totals, you see that this conference is pretty well balanced and pretty well represented. Interesting to note, Texas State didn't put anybody on either team. Is that a little bit of a snide, like, hey, you're leaving? See you later. We ain't going to get any of your guys any extra credit. I don't think that's really the case. But
nobody, though? I didn't realize that.
Not
nobody?
A single soul. Nope. Not a single Texas State representative. And, we'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow, but App State, shockingly absent in a lot of these things as well. They didn't go nobody, but they've put like 9 guys on some of these lists in years past. So we'll see the East tomorrow, and we'll talk more. Are you
talking about App State?
Yeah. Just to mention,
isn't that interesting based on where they ended up too? Like, this is a tomorrow conversation, but
right. It's a little preview, if you will. It's just, I guess, you're looking at it as a lot of unprovens, right? Like, it's not that they don't have some talent that they've brought in, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I guess until you see it proven, right? I mean, we saw, what's his name, quarterback from JMU transfer to Texas State last year, and he was named Sunbelt preseason player of the year. So it's not that they're scared to do something like that. They just didn't name any Texas State players. So that was a little bit interesting.
Plowed through for over 4,500 yards or something like that. So, yeah. I mean, but anyway.
Anyway, that I think pretty much wraps it up. Unless you got any more news or notes, like some breaking news. You want to talk about the next realignment move?
No, I wish I had that. I mean, I would just say that I think that much like a couple years ago, because I remember 2022, it was very similar to this. The East, I would say, top to bottom, is is just overall more solid. The West is like, it's starting to creep up, where it's like, okay, now it's getting really competitive. Is it because you've got like more, I guess, parity, or is it because they're just, I don't know. I really like the way that the West looks this year. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the West's year. We've been talking about the Sun Belt East for the past 3 years. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas State, or not even Texas State, just the West in general. I'm looking at Texas State. That's why I said that. But I wouldn't be surprised if the West kind of came out swinging this year and really established themselves as the top dogs this year. Because you look at the other side and kind of a sneak peek into tomorrow. You look at the other side of the conference, and you've got some names, but a lot of those names are unproven names. A lot of those names are, other than like a select few, in terms of like key contributors.
Right.
I don't know. it could be the West's year. I liked everything I heard. I'm excited to see what the West does, but on to the East tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to see the parity, like you said, in the West. It is funny that you say parity, but like then we looked at Louisiana being in the championship game 5 out of the 7 times it's existed. So parity, but like it's also like the top team has been the top team. Although Troy's got a lot to say about that because when they've gone in, they've usually won the thing. So it's interesting, but we're having more teams like you said in the East. We've had more teams for a lot longer, and now we're finally getting that on that West side. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be one of the most exciting seasons as far as the West Division is concerned. That wraps up the West Division. Thanks for tuning in, listening along, and we will be back tomorrow night, same time, same place, and we will bring you what we learn from the East. Thanks for watching.